In today's video, we're looking at 5 people who were eaten alive during cage diving, from a travel blogger's fatal tiger shark encounter to a construction worker's brutal attack when his cage failed. But first, we start in Australia's shark-infested waters, where crystal-clear conditions had created the perfect storm for a devastating feeding frenzy. It was July 18, 2016, when the crystal-clear waters off Port Lincoln, South Australia, would become the site of one of the most shocking cage diving incidents ever recorded. The coastal town, known as Australia's Great White Shark Capital, attracted thrill-seekers and filmmakers from across the globe to the Neptune Islands, where some of the largest great whites in the world congregated. On this particular morning, the ocean conditions appeared perfect. Calm seas, excellent visibility, and reports of multiple great whites in the area. The Neptune Islands lie just offshore, forming one of the world's most active great white hunting zones, with massive fur seal colonies that made these waters so attractive to the apex predators. Dante Vance, a 29-year-old commercial videographer from Los Angeles, had traveled to Port Lincoln with 2 close friends to capture close proximity shark footage for an upcoming documentary project. Known for his risk-tolerant nature and competitive spirit, Dante often dismissed safety margins that others considered essential. His portfolio included extreme sports footage and dangerous wildlife encounters, making him overconfident in high-risk situations. His friends, both experienced with underwater camera equipment, were positioned inside the cage to handle the technical aspects, while Dante focused on getting the perfect shots that would set his work apart from standard cage diving footage. The dive operation began routinely at dawn, but several warning signs emerged early. The cage was occupied by 2 divers with camera equipment, operating within rated capacity but crowded due to the bulky filming gear. The crew conducted regulated bait operations at appropriate distances, though visibility dropped briefly as the chum cloud drifted past the cage. Most concerning, Dante repeatedly leaned forward so that his shoulder and camera housing extended beyond the cage bars to frame his shots, testing the boundaries of the safety protocols. After the first warning from the dive master, Dante briefly complied but soon resumed his risky positioning. Sharks as a lineage have ruled the oceans for over 400 million years, with great whites emerging as one of the most dominant apex predators in modern marine ecosystems. These massive creatures can reach lengths of 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their powerful jaws contain up to 300 serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows, capable of exerting enough force to crush bone and tear through dense muscle. The Neptune Islands are known for hosting some of the largest great whites in the world, with a history of shark encounters and rare but serious incidents in surrounding South Australian waters. As the cage descended, visibility was temporarily reduced as the chum cloud drifted through the area, creating a clouded environment around the cage. Despite repeated warnings, Dante made his fatal mistake by shifting his position and leaning far beyond the cage bars with his camera housing for what he believed would be the perfect angle. A massive great white, estimated by witnesses to be up to 18 feet long and weighing over 4,000 pounds, approached silently through the murky water, drawn by the movement that triggered its investigative instincts. The attack came with devastating speed and precision. The impact was instantaneous, a single explosive investigatory bite, before the shark immediately released and vanished into the murk. The force of the strike slammed Dante's body violently against the cage bars, his exposed arm and shoulder bearing the full brunt of the massive jaws. Dante was immediately pulled back inside the cage by his horrified friends, who witnessed the catastrophic extent of his injuries as blood poured from the massive wound, creating an expanding crimson cloud in the water around the cage. The damage was catastrophic. Uncontrollable bleeding from his mangled arm and shoulder overwhelmed any attempt at emergency care. His friends desperately attempted to apply pressure to the wounds, but the severity of the trauma made bleeding control impossible. Dante's arm hung useless, the shoulder joint clearly destroyed by the crushing force of the bite. The massive soft tissue destruction and arterial trauma were beyond field treatment. The dive was immediately aborted, as Dante showed signs of severe shock from blood loss. The crew began emergency surface procedures, hauling the cage upward, while Dante's friends continued their desperate attempts to stem the bleeding. The water around the cage clouded red with blood as his life drained away. By the time they broke the surface, Dante had lost consciousness, his pulse barely detectable. Despite immediate attempts at resuscitation and the application of pressure dressings and emergency tourniquets where possible, he was airlifted to a nearby hospital in critical condition. Later examination confirmed complete transection of the brachial artery and massive soft tissue destruction throughout the shoulder and upper arm. He survived long enough to reach the hospital, but succumbed later that day from complications related to massive blood loss and traumatic shock, making this one of the most severe cage diving injuries ever recorded in Australia. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by Australian maritime authorities, focusing on safety protocols and cage construction standards. Dante's family released a brief statement requesting privacy, while expressing their devastation over the loss. The tragedy at Port Lincoln would not be the last serious shark diving incident that year. Just months later, another incident would occur at Guadalupe Island, where a travel blogger named Maren Cole would face her own terrifying encounter with a different species of shark, one known for its opportunistic hunting behavior and powerful bite force. It was September 2nd, 2017, when the remote waters surrounding Guadalupe Island, Mexico, became the scene of another devastating cage diving tragedy. Located 150 miles off the Baja California coast, this volcanic island served as a seasonal feeding ground for massive great white sharks. Weather conditions had been deteriorating throughout the morning, with increasing swells and shifting winds creating challenging conditions for dive operations. Maren Cole, a 34-year-old travel blogger from Portland, Oregon, had built her online following by documenting extreme travel experiences across 6 continents. Known for her meticulous planning and organized approach to dangerous activities, she had researched cage diving extensively before booking this expedition. Her partner remained on the surface vessel, filming her descent and managing the blog's social media accounts in real time. The couple had planned this trip as the centerpiece of their upcoming documentary series about confronting personal fears. The dive began according to standard protocols. The top entry cage descended smoothly to depth, with Maren spending nearly 20 minutes observing several great white sharks investigating the bait lines. The massive predators circled at various distances, their powerful bodies moving with fluid grace through the clear water. Visibility remained excellent despite the deteriorating surface conditions, allowing spectacular footage of the sharks' investigative behavior. Great whites possess exceptional sensory capabilities, detecting vibrations and electrical fields from great distances, with their acute sense of smell allowing them to detect blood in the water at concentrations as low as 1 part per million. They are known for their investigative behavior, often approaching unfamiliar objects to assess whether they constitute prey. As surface conditions continued to worsen, the dive master signaled for the cage to be retrieved. The ascent proceeded normally until the cage reached just below the surface, where increasingly violent swells created chaotic conditions. The crew worked frantically to stabilize the cage while maintaining safe positioning below the waterline. During this critical phase, a massive great white shark, estimated at 17 feet long, approached the area, likely drawn by the commotion and concentrated bait scent. In the confusion of the surface operations, with the cage surging violently in the swells, Marin's underwater camera strap began to slip from her grip. In a moment of panic, she instinctively reached down to stop the expensive equipment from falling, her arm extending through the cage bars as she stretched desperately to secure the camera. At that exact moment, the great white approached the cage and bit the gap where her arm protruded, her limb becoming trapped in the shark's powerful jaws. The triangular teeth penetrated deep into her forearm muscle, the powerful jaw muscles contracting with crushing force. The bite caused massive soft tissue destruction and arterial laceration as major blood vessels ruptured, releasing a cloud of blood into the churning water. The shark immediately released and disappeared into the depths, its brief investigative bite concluding as quickly as it had begun. The violent motion of the cage and the shark's investigation of the structure had created the fatal exposure. The crew immediately began emergency retrieval procedures, fighting against the violent swells while attempting to bring the cage fully to the surface. The damage was severe: massive soft tissue loss and arterial bleeding that pumped blood into the water at an alarming rate. The crushing injury had caused extensive trauma to the forearm. Despite the crew's frantic efforts to apply tourniquets and provide emergency medical care, Marin had sustained injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. The combination of severe trauma, significant blood loss, and the remote location created a critical situation. She lost consciousness from blood loss and shock as the vessel immediately initiated emergency protocols, heading at maximum speed toward shore while maintaining radio contact with medical authorities. An emergency airlift was arranged, but Marin succumbed to her injuries during the evacuation flight, the combination of blood loss and trauma proving insurmountable despite the crew's heroic efforts and rapid emergency response. The incident triggered an immediate investigation by Mexican maritime authorities, focusing on surface procedures during adverse weather conditions and emergency response protocols. Marin's family issued a statement expressing their grief while requesting privacy during their mourning period. Several cage diving operators implemented additional safety measures following the tragedy, including mandatory suspension of operations when swells exceed specified thresholds. The fatal incidents at Guadalupe Island and Port Lincoln highlighted the inherent dangers of cage diving operations, but these would not be the final tragedies. Thousands of miles away in Gansbaai, South Africa, another experienced diver named Curtis Burke would soon encounter the region's apex predator in waters known for their unpredictable great white behavior. It was May 11, 2015, when the notorious waters of Gansbaai, South Africa, would witness another catastrophic cage diving incident that shocked the international diving community. Located near Cape Town, Gansbaai had earned a fearsome reputation as one of the world's most dangerous shark diving locations, with its shallow waters and aggressive great white shark populations, creating perfect storm conditions for serious encounters. The area's unique geography, with Dyer Island and its abundant seal colonies nearby, concentrated great whites in a relatively small area. Water temperatures remained cool at 59 degrees Fahrenheit, while moderate swells and decent visibility of 30 feet created seemingly acceptable diving conditions. Curtis Burke, a 41-year-old mechanical engineer from Detroit, Michigan, had traveled to South Africa with a diving partner to complete what he considered his ultimate bucket list experience. Known for his overconfident personality and dismissive attitude toward safety protocols, Curtis had a history of ignoring expert advice in favor of his own judgment. His engineering background made him believe he understood risk assessment better than dive operators who had worked these waters for decades. Most concerning was his fascination with the sharks themselves. He had repeatedly expressed his desire to make contact with a great white, dismissing warnings about the dangers of such interactions. Warning signs emerged immediately during the pre-dive briefing. Curtis openly questioned the safety instructions, arguing that the cage bars were unnecessarily restrictive. He dismissed repeated warnings about keeping all limbs inside the protective barrier, claiming his engineering experience qualified him to assess structural integrity. During the descent, he began making gestures toward approaching sharks, clearly planning something against protocol. The dive master repeatedly warned him to stop his disruptive behavior and maintain position inside the cage. Great white sharks are apex predators responsible for more fatal attacks on humans than any other shark species. Adult great whites, typically measuring 14 to 16 feet in length and weighing 1,500 to 3,000 pounds, are the most likely to approach cage diving operations due to their bold investigative nature. Their powerful jaws contain serrated triangular teeth designed to tear through flesh and blubber. At 25 feet depth, after multiple stern warnings from the dive master about his behavior, Curtis made his fatal mistake. As a large adult, great white approached the cage, estimated at 15 feet long and weighing approximately 2,200 pounds. Curtis extended his left arm completely outside the cage bars in an attempt to touch the shark. His fascination with the predator overrode all safety training as he reached toward the massive creature, believing he could make peaceful contact. The attack erupted with explosive violence. The great white delivered a single investigatory bite, its massive jaws clamping down on Curtis's extended left arm and shoulder. The serrated teeth tore through deltoid muscle and rotator cuff tissue with devastating efficiency, severing the brachial artery and causing massive muscle trauma. The bite damaged the shoulder joint as blood poured uncontrollably into the surrounding water. The predator backed off after the bite, as if confirming it wasn't prey, and retreated as a dense crimson cloud expanded rapidly around the cage. Curtis's agonized screams sent streams of bubbles toward the surface as he clutched desperately at the ruined shoulder, unable to stem the massive bleeding. The great white showed no further interest and disappeared into the murky depths. The dive was immediately aborted as Curtis's wetsuit filled with blood from the severed brachial artery. Shock set in rapidly. His heart rate spiked dangerously as his blood pressure plummeted. The freezing water accelerated the physiological crisis, causing violent shivering that increased the hemorrhage rate. The dive master immediately initiated emergency cage retrieval protocols. By the time the cage surfaced, Curtis had lost a significant amount of blood and was showing signs of severe shock. Emergency personnel found him conscious but in critical condition, his face pale beneath his mask, the water around him stained red. Despite aggressive resuscitation attempts, including emergency tourniquet application and pressure dressings, Curtis lost consciousness during transport to shore. He was pronounced dead from exsanguination and hypovolemic shock before reaching the hospital. The severed brachial artery having caused fatal blood loss despite immediate emergency response. The autopsy revealed complete transection of the brachial artery and massive soft tissue destruction throughout the shoulder girdle. Death resulted from exsanguination and hypovolemic shock, with secondary contributions from cold water immersion. The incident prompted immediate investigation by South African maritime authorities, focusing on cage construction standards and protocols for managing difficult clients. But the dangers of cage diving would soon manifest in an even more remote location, where a marine biology student named Romy Grant would face her own terrifying encounter in the isolated waters of Guadalupe Island. It was August 27, 2018, when the pristine waters surrounding Guadalupe Island, Mexico, became the site of another devastating cage diving incident. The remote location, 150 miles off the Baja California coast, offered some of the world's clearest shark diving conditions, but also meant that emergency assistance was hours away, making any serious incident extremely challenging to manage. The isolated setting provided pristine diving conditions with visibility exceeding 150 feet, and water temperatures holding steady at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the remote location also meant that advanced medical care was far from reach, making any serious injury potentially fatal. Romy Grant, a 26-year-old marine biology graduate student from the University of California, San Diego, had joined a privately funded research expedition to study great white shark behavior patterns using advanced underwater filming equipment. The expedition was using an experimental filming platform with modified cage specifications to accommodate specialized research equipment. Known for her calm demeanor and methodical approach to scientific procedures, Romy had extensive experience with controlled laboratory settings, but limited exposure to large marine predators in their natural environment. Her academic focus on shark sensory systems had prepared her theoretically for this field research, but practical experience with massive great whites remained minimal. 3 close friends from her graduate program accompanied her on the expedition, all eager to observe sharks in their natural habitat. The dive operation began according to the experimental protocols, with the research team using the modified filming cage designed for extended observation periods. The cage had been altered to accommodate multiple camera mounts and research equipment, modifications that required extra vigilance from divers, but had been approved for the private research project. Several great white sharks had been circling the area throughout the morning, displaying heightened investigative behavior during feeding activity. The research team had been successfully filming for over an hour when the largest shark of the day appeared. A massive female estimated at over 18 feet long. These powerful hunters possess rows of triangular serrated teeth designed for cutting through flesh and blubber. Female great whites are typically larger than males and show heightened investigative behavior during feeding activity, often approaching potential food sources with bold, direct approaches. As the massive female approached the cage, Romy positioned herself to capture footage of the shark's approach. The research had been proceeding smoothly when disaster struck due to a rushed modification. The cage's emergency exit mechanism, designed to allow rapid escape in case of cage failure, had been hastily modified due to time constraints in the research schedule. The safety latch, altered to accommodate the new equipment configuration, was not properly secured. Under the pressure of the water and the cage's movement, the emergency hatch suddenly opened, creating an immediate opening to the surface. In the confusion that followed, Romy found herself partially outside the protective barrier as the emergency system malfunctioned. The enormous great white, displaying typical investigative behavior, approached the cage at the exact moment the hatch opened. The shark bit the exposed opening, and Romy's torso was pulled into the massive jaws. The bite was instantaneous and devastating. The massive jaws clamped down with crushing force before immediately releasing. The serrated teeth caused catastrophic damage, penetrating deep into her chest and abdomen. The force of the bite caused massive internal trauma and arterial damage that was beyond any field treatment. Romy was immediately pulled back into the cage by her research partners, but the damage was beyond catastrophic. The bite had caused massive internal injuries and uncontrollable bleeding. Blood poured into the water as her colleagues desperately attempted to provide emergency care, but the severity of the trauma made any meaningful treatment impossible. The research vessel immediately initiated emergency protocols, surfacing the cage and beginning first aid procedures. However, the severity of the internal damage and the remote location created an impossible situation. Despite the team's medical training and emergency equipment, the injuries were beyond field treatment capabilities. Romy lost consciousness almost immediately from massive internal bleeding and shock. The vessel immediately began racing toward shore while maintaining radio contact with emergency services, but the combination of catastrophic internal trauma and the hours-long journey to advanced medical care proved insurmountable. She was pronounced dead from massive internal hemorrhage before the vessel could reach port. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by Mexican maritime authorities and international research organizations, focusing on emergency exit mechanisms and safety protocols for experimental cage designs. Romy Grant's tragedy was a devastating reminder of how quickly experimental equipment failures can turn fatal in remote locations. For Pierce Hale, it wouldn't be experimental modifications that posed the threat, but the structural failure of a recently repaired cage in the dangerous waters of Gansbaai, where even the smallest equipment malfunction can prove deadly when combined with human error. It was April 6, 2017, when the notorious waters of Gansbaai, South Africa, became the scene of another devastating cage diving tragedy. Located near Cape Town, Gansbaai had earned its reputation as the great white shark capital of the world, with the waters around Dyer Island and Geyser Rock forming one of the most active great white hunting zones on the planet. Pierce Hale, a 38-year-old construction foreman from Houston, Texas, had traveled to Gansbaai with 4 close friends for what they planned as the ultimate adventure vacation. The group had booked with a licensed commercial operator using a recently modified cage that had undergone repairs following damage from a previous season. The steel structure featured a corner joint that had been re-welded after corrosion damage, but the repair had not been fully stress-tested under operational conditions. Known for his dismissive attitude towards safety protocols, Pierce relied on his construction experience to assess structural integrity rather than following established diving guidelines. The dive operation began according to standard protocols, with the group entering the steel cage designed for great white encounters in Gansbaai's challenging waters. Great whites in this region are known for their size and aggressive investigative behavior, requiring specially constructed barriers with reinforced joints and careful positioning. Several concerning factors emerged during the dive preparation. Great white activity had increased significantly during the morning operations, with multiple large individuals showing typical investigative behavior around the cage. The operator conducted standard baiting procedures at appropriate distances, but the presence of several massive great whites created an environment requiring absolute adherence to safety protocols. Great whites in Gansbaai waters are particularly large and bold, often approaching cages directly to investigate potential food sources. Their investigative behavior involves powerful bumping and testing of structures, which can create tremendous stress on cage components, especially at joints and weld points. As the cage descended to 25 feet, the dive proceeded normally for the first 20 minutes. Pierce and his companions observed several great whites circling at various distances, their massive forms moving with surprising grace through the clear water. The dive master maintained strict protocols, ensuring all participants remained safely within the protective barrier. A massive great white, estimated at 17 feet long and weighing over 3,500 pounds, had been circling the cage for several minutes, displaying typical bold investigative behavior. Great whites are known for their direct approach to unfamiliar objects, often making physical contact to assess potential structures. The shark began bumping the cage repeatedly, each impact sending vibrations through the steel frame and placing stress on the welded joints. Pierce felt the frame flex and saw the gap widen as the cage shook with each bump. His construction background made him believe he could assess the structural integrity of the repair. Despite warnings from the dive master to remain inside the cage, Pierce positioned himself near the corner to examine what he perceived as a loose connection. After several powerful bumps from the investigating great white, the repaired corner joint, weakened by previous corrosion and stressed by the repeated impacts, began to fail. The weld seam started separating, causing the corner bracket to bend and deform. The structural failure created a gap in the protective barrier where the corner had been compromised. At that critical moment, Pierce made his fatal mistake by extending his right arm through the newly created opening to examine the failed joint. The great white, continuing its investigative behavior, approached the compromised section of the cage where Pierce's arm was now exposed outside the protective barrier. The attack was swift and devastating. The shark bit the exposed gap, and Pierce's arm was trapped in the powerful jaws. The serrated teeth penetrated deep into muscle and bone as the shark delivered a brief but violent investigative bite before immediately releasing. The force of the bite caused catastrophic damage, shattering bone and severing major arteries. The great white immediately disengaged after the brief contact, displaying typical investigative behavior rather than feeding intent. However, the shark's powerful bite had created injuries beyond field treatment. Pierce was immediately pulled back through the compromised cage opening by his horrified companions, but the damage was beyond catastrophic. The shark's crushing bite had severed critical arterial vessels and caused massive tissue destruction. Blood poured uncontrollably from the traumatic injury as his friends desperately attempted to apply tourniquets while the dive master initiated emergency surface procedures. The compromised cage was rapidly brought to the surface, but Pierce had already lost consciousness from massive blood loss and shock. The great white's powerful investigative bite had caused injuries far more severe than typical encounters due to the complete exposure of his limb outside the failed protective barrier. Despite immediate emergency medical attention and rapid transport to shore, Pierce was pronounced dead from exsanguination and traumatic shock before reaching the hospital, the catastrophic blood loss proving rapidly fatal. The incident triggered an immediate investigation by South African maritime authorities, focusing on cage maintenance and repair protocols for great white encounters. The investigation revealed that while the weld repair had been completed according to standard procedures, the repeated stress from large great whites' investigative bumping had caused the repair to fail prematurely. Pierce's violation of safety guidelines by extending his arm outside the cage had placed him in extreme danger when the structural integrity was compromised. Pierce's family issued a statement expressing their grief while acknowledging his tendency toward risky behavior. The diving industry implemented additional safety measures, including enhanced inspection protocols for repaired cages and mandatory stress testing before returning equipment to service. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now